It started as these things often do, with a whisper, not a sound but a feeling, a sudden cold silence where warmth used to be. My wife, Chloe, the woman I had built a life with for 22 years, had become a stranger in our own home. I told myself it was stress, the midlife anxieties we all face, but then I found the phone, the second one, and in the blue glow of that hidden screen, my carefully constructed world didn't just crack, it detonated. The rage was primal, a beast clawing at my ribs, but beneath it, a chilling calm began to form, a thought so cold and clear it scared me. This wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. You think you know how this story ends, a bitter divorce, a broken man, a triumphant affair. Think again. Because what I uncovered next, and who stepped out of the shadows to stand by my side, changed everything. Before diving in, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Have you ever dealt with betrayal? Let's hear your stories. Part 1, The Hum of a Lie. Our marriage hadn't died violently. It was dying of 1,000 quiet cuts, a slow fade from vibrant color to monochrome. At 48, I was an architect, a man who believed in solid foundations and clear blueprints. I designed our life with the same meticulous care I put into my buildings. 15 years ago, I'd walked away from a partnership at a major Chicago firm, a move that had my colleagues shaking their heads. But Chloe was pregnant with our daughter, Lily, and she'd wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So I downshifted, started my own smaller practice from a home office. Less prestige, less money, but more time for school runs, soccer games, and the quiet comfort of being present. I'd laid that sacrifice at the altar of our family, believing it was the cornerstone of our shared happiness. For years it was, but recently a strange hum of dissonance had entered our suburban harmony. It was in the way Chloe, now 45 and back in the marketing world for the last few years, would angle her phone away from me. It was in the new, expensive lingerie that never seemed to make an appearance in our bedroom. Our intimacy had become a polite, scheduled routine, lacking the spontaneous fire that once defined us. I'd try to recall that passion, the memory of her scent on my skin after a hurried afternoon together, but it felt like watching a film about someone else's life. The signs were there, scattered like architectural sketches I couldn't quite assemble into a coherent design. Late nights at the office became more frequent, explained away with a sigh about a demanding new client. Her laughter, when I heard it, seemed reserved for the friends she met for girls' night, a weekly ritual that had recently become sacrosanct. I'd make a small joke, something that would have once earned me an eye roll and a smile, and she'd just offer a tight, distant nod, her mind already somewhere else. I tried to bridge the gap. I suggested a weekend away, just the two of us at the lake house where I'd proposed. "I can't, Mark," she'd said, not even looking up from her laptop. "This quarter is just brutal, maybe in the spring." It was always maybe later. Our entire relationship had become a post-dated check. There was a dark humor in my own oblivion. I, the man who could spot a hairline fracture in a concrete support beam from 50 feet away, couldn't see the structural decay in my own home. I told myself I was being paranoid. Midlife crisis, right? It was a cliché for a reason. Men my age bought sports cars, maybe women bought new friends and a renewed focus on their careers. It was a phase. We'd find our way back to each other. We always did. I clung to that belief like a man clinging to a safety harness, all while the scaffolding of our life was groaning under a weight I couldn't yet identify. Part 2, The Glow of a Second Screen. The discovery happened on a Tuesday. The day was aggressively, almost insultingly, normal. I was in my home office, finishing up the final renderings for a community library project. Lily was at her after-school coding club, and the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Chloe had called an hour earlier, her voice strained. "Work is a nightmare, honey. I'm going to be super late. Don't wait up for dinner." It was the 5th super late night in 2 weeks. I needed to find the property survey for our house to check a zoning ordinance for a client's project nearby. I remembered Chloe had scanned a bunch of old documents onto her personal cloud drive a few months back. Our lives were digitally intertwined, shared calendars, photo streams, cloud storage, or so I thought. I opened the shared family folder on our desktop computer and started searching. Nothing. I tried a few different keywords. Still nothing. Frustrated, I remembered our old iPad, the one Lily used for games until she got her own laptop. It was usually lying on the kitchen counter, and it was synced to Chloe's main account. I figured I could access her drive directly from there. I found it plugged in by the coffee maker. I unlocked it, our anniversary date, the irony of which felt like a physical slap, and opened the file manager. And that's when I saw it. A folder I didn't recognize, labeled simply projects. Curiosity, a cold and creeping thing, got the better of me. I tapped it open. It was full of screenshots, dozens of them. They were text messages. Him can't stop thinking about last night. That hotel room, you're incredible. Chloe, you were the incredible one. I felt so alive. Mark hasn't looked at me like that in years. Him, he doesn't deserve you. When are you going to tell him, Chloe? Soon. I need to find the right time. It has to be perfect. My breath hitched. The air in my lungs turned to ice. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I scrolled, my thumb moving with a will of its own. More texts, photos. Two of them, Chloe and a younger man with a confident, smarmy grin, clinking champagne glasses on a hotel balcony. She was wearing the black lace lingerie I'd never seen. Another photo showed them kissing, her hand tangled in his perfectly styled hair. She looked radiant, happier than I had seen her in years. The man's name was Ethan, a dynamic young VP she'd mentioned in passing. A colleague, the demanding new client, the late nights, the girls' nights. It all clicked into place, the disparate sketches suddenly forming a horrifying, complete blueprint. But the final blow, the one that shattered my foundation completely, was a text from Chloe at the bottom of the long thread. It was sent just an hour ago, right around the time she had called me. Chloe, had to cancel on Mark again tonight, said it was work, can't wait to see you. My place or yours, his name is Mark, not him. The casual cruelty of it, the winking emoji, it broke something inside me. This wasn't a mistake, this was a plan, a project, and I was the obstacle to be managed. I stood there in the quiet of our sun-drenched kitchen, the smell of brewing coffee in the air, holding this glowing rectangle of betrayal in my hands. The normal, mundane world outside the window kept moving, but my own had just stopped. Dead Part 3, the echo chamber of a broken heart. The hours that followed were a blur of disjointed moments, a slideshow of a man losing his grip. I remember putting the iPad back exactly where I found it, my movements slow and deliberate, as if I were handling a bomb. I went back to my office and stared at the library renderings on my screen. The clean lines, the logical flow of space, the promise of a quiet, ordered world, it all seemed like a mockery. My mind became an echo chamber, her words, his words, replayed in a torturous loop. Mark hasn't looked at me like that in years. Was that true? I searched my memory, trying to pinpoint the moment the light in my eyes had dimmed. Was it after the third time I'd remortgaged the house to keep my business afloat during a recession? Or was it during the endless nights I'd stayed up with a feverish Lily so Chloe could be rested for a big presentation? I had seen those, Mom. Ensa's acts of love, of partnership. She had seen them as neglect. The rage came first, a hot, white-hot wave that made my hands shake. I imagined confronting her, throwing the iPad at her feet, watching her perfect, curated life shatter. I wanted to scream, to break things, to hear the sound of something external matching the demolition inside my chest. I paced the length of my office, my fists clenched, the beast inside me roaring for release. Then came the heartbreak. It was a colder, heavier thing. It settled in my bones, a deep, crushing weight. This was Chloe, the girl I'd met in a college art history class, the woman who'd cried with joy when I proposed under a meteor shower, the mother of my child. We had a history, a shared language, 1,000 inside jokes. How could that person coexist with the woman in those texts, the one who dismissed our 22 years with a casual lie and a winking emoji? Self-doubt crept in next, a venomous whisper in the echo chamber. Was it my fault? Had I become boring, predictable? The reliable, hard-working husband who paid the bills and coached little leg but had forgotten how to be a lover. I thought of my comfortable paunch, the graying at my temples. I looked in the mirror and saw a man who had traded excitement for stability. And my wife had apparently decided to cash in that stability for a younger, more dynamic model. For a moment, a fleeting, shameful second, I thought about what it would be like to just let it go, to pretend I hadn't seen anything, to just carry on, living inside the lie because the truth was too catastrophic to contemplate. Could I do that? Could I kiss her goodnight, knowing she tasted of another man? The thought made me physically ill. No, that wasn't a life, it was a sentence. I sat in the dark of my office long after the sun went down, the library blueprints glowing on the screen. A building starts with a plan. When the plan is flawed, you don't just keep building. You stop, you assess the damage. And then you decide whether to tear it all down or find a way to reinforce the foundation. My foundation was gone. It was time to start drawing up a new set of plans, not for a library, but for a demolition. Part 4, The Architecture of Denial. When Chloe finally came home around 11, she moved through the house with the practiced nonchalance of a seasoned liar. I was sitting in the living room, the lights off, a glass of whiskey sweating in my hand. "Mark, you're still up," she said, her voice a little too bright. The scent of a different perfume, not her usual floral one, but something muskier, more masculine, trailed her into the room. "Couldn't sleep," I said, my voice flat. She flipped on a lamp, and her smile faltered as she saw my expression. "Is everything okay? You look grim." Here it was, the moment of confrontation. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against the silence. "Where were you, Chloe?" Her eyes, the same eyes that had looked at me with adoration for 2 decades, became guarded. The mask slipped into place. "I told you, work, it was that quarterly review." It went on forever. She started taking off her coat, a performance of domestic routine meant to disarm me. "That's funny," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "because I called your office around 9. The night janitor said everyone had been gone for hours. The color drained from her face. It was a fleeting, almost imperceptible shift, but I saw it. I saw the flicker of panic before the walls went up. This was the architecture of denial, and she was its master designer. "That's ridiculous," she scoffed, but her voice was a half octave too high. "I was in a conference call with the London team. We used a different boardroom." The lies were so smooth, so practiced, it was stunning. She was gaslighting me, trying to make me believe my own senses were faulty. It was insulting. "So the London team wears the same cologne as your new VP, Ethan?" I asked, letting his name hang in the air between us. Her composure finally cracked, her jaw tightened. "What are you implying, Mark, that I'm cheating on you? After everything we've been through, I can't believe you'd even think that. You've been so distant lately, so wrapped up in your own world. Maybe if you paid a little more attention to me, you wouldn't have to invent these insane conspiracy theories." It was a masterclass in deflection. In an instant, she had flipped the script. I was the one on trial for being distant, for being suspicious, for not trusting her. The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. My internal debate, the one that considered forgiveness, understanding, a path back, died right there. She wasn't a woman who had made a mistake. She was a woman who was annoyed she'd been caught. Through her angry tirade, I overheard a snippet of her perspective, a twisted justification. "I'm just so tired of this quiet, boring life. I need excitement, Mark. I need to feel like a woman, not just a wife and a mother." She felt trapped. Trapped in the beautiful home I designed, in the comfortable life my sacrifices had provided. The irony was a bitter pill. While her words were meant to wound me, they gave me a strange, cold clarity. She wasn't looking for a partner, she was looking for an escape, and I was the prison guard she needed to flee. The conversation ended with her storming upstairs, slamming the bedroom door, leaving me alone in the lamplight with the dregs of my whiskey and the ruins of our marriage. The beast of rage was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous, a quiet, calculating resolve. Part 5, The Queen on My Side of the Board. The next few days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Chloe alternated between icy silence and saccharine sweetness, trying to pull me back into the familiar dynamic of our marriage. I played my part, the confused, slightly paranoid husband, all while my mind was a whirlwind of strategy. I needed a lawyer, I needed evidence, I needed a plan. The unexpected twist, the piece I could never have anticipated, arrived on Saturday morning. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, called. At 68, she was a retired history teacher, a woman with a razor-sharp mind and a gaze that missed nothing. She adored Lily and had always treated me with a warmth and respect that felt genuine. "Mark, dear," she said, her voice crisp, "I'm in town for a doctor's appointment and was hoping I could treat you and Lily to lunch. Chloe mentioned she's busy with a work retreat this weekend." A work retreat. The lie was so blatant it was almost comical. I knew from the deleted but not yet erased search history on the iPad that she was at a boutique hotel in wine country with Ethan. Elena, that would be wonderful, I said, a plan beginning to form in my mind. Lily would love that. We met at a quiet Italian restaurant. After we ordered, Elena fixed me with her intelligent eyes. You look tired, Mark. Is everything all right? I had a choice. I could lie, maintain the family facade, and suffer in silence, or I could take a risk. Looking at this woman who had always valued truth and character above all else, I decided to bet on her. No, Elena, I said, my voice thick with an emotion I could no longer contain. Nothing is all right, and I told her everything. I laid out the late nights, the emotional distance, the second phone, the texts, the photos. I expected shock, maybe denial, a mother's instinct to defend her child. I expected her to tell me I was mistaken, that there was a reasonable explanation. Instead, she just listened, her expression growing harder, more disappointed with every word I spoke. When I finished, she slowly placed her fork down, took a sip of her water, and looked me straight in the eye. My husband, she began, her voice low and steady, Chloe's father, did the same thing to me when Chloe was just a teenager. Different methods, of course, no burner phones back then, just lipstick on a collar and unexplained charges on a credit card. But the pattern is the same, the arrogance, the entitlement. The utter disregard for the person they vowed to protect. I was stunned into silence. I stayed, she continued, a flicker of old pain in her eyes, for Chloe. I thought I was doing the right thing, keeping the family together. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I taught my daughter that betrayal can be tolerated, that vows are conditional. It seems she learned the lesson all too well. She reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a lifeline. You are a good man, Mark. You have been a wonderful husband to my daughter and a phenomenal father to my granddaughter. I will not stand by and watch her dismantle your life because she's chasing a cheap, fleeting thrill. In that moment, the chessboard of my life, which had felt so chaotic and hopeless, suddenly clarified. The enemy queen was brazenly exposed, but a new, powerful piece had just moved to my side of the board. Chloe is sentimental and she is careless, Elena said, her voice shifting from empathetic to strategic. She thinks she's smarter than everyone else. We are going to use that against her. So you tell me, Mark, what's our first move? Part 6, Blueprints for a Takedown. The conversation with Elena was like a splash of ice water to the face. It washed away the fog of heartbreak and replaced it with the sharp, clean lines of a strategic plan. We weren't plotting petty revenge. We were designing a controlled demolition, one that would ensure Lily and I landed safely while Chloe's fantasy world came crashing down. Elena, with her intimate knowledge of her daughter's psychology, became my chief strategist. First, she instructed over the phone a few days later, you need to stop being the wounded husband and start being the oblivious one. Be pleasant, be normal, make her think her gaslighting worked and you've retreated into a cloud of self-doubt. A comfortable enemy is a careless enemy. It was the hardest acting job of my life. I'd make Chloe coffee in the morning, ask about her day, and listen to her fabricated stories about work with a placid expression, all while my stomach churned with acid. The dark humor of the situation was my only solace. There was a perverse thrill in watching her spin her web, completely unaware that I was holding the scissors. My next task was evidence gathering. I hired a private investigator, a discreet professional Elena recommended through a friend. Within a week, I had a full dossier, photos of Chloe and Ethan checking into hotels, receipts for lavish dinners charged to a new credit card in her name, even a timeline of their trysts that matched her late nights at the office perfectly. Meanwhile, Elena worked her own magic. Chloe has always been terrible with finances, she told me. She sees money as a means to an end, not something to be managed. Her father was the same. At Elena's urging, I scheduled a meeting with our financial advisor under the guise of planning for retirement. With Chloe present, I asked for a full breakdown of our assets. The advisor, a man we'd used for years, pulled up the statements. And there it was, a quiet anomaly I would have otherwise missed, a series of significant withdrawals from our joint investment account over the past 6 months, totaling nearly $50,000. Chloe paled. Oh, that, she said, forcing a laugh. I was moving some things around, trying to capitalize on a market trend. I was going to surprise you when it paid off." The advisor looked at her, then at the statement, and then at me with a pained expression. The investment had been transferred to her personal account, the same one she was using to fund her affair. I feigned confusion. "Oh, okay, honey. Well, just be careful. We need to be a team on these things." Her relief was palpable. She thought she'd dodged another bullet. What she didn't know was that I had just acquired Exhibit A for my lawyer, fraudulent dissipation of marital assets. Alina was a master of subtle reconnaissance. She'd call Chloe for their weekly chat and, with a few seemingly innocent questions, learn everything we needed to know. She found out that Ethan was also married. She found out that Chloe and Ethan were planning to leave their respective spouses on the same day, envisioning some grand, romantic gesture. And most importantly, she found out the date they had chosen, our 23rd wedding anniversary. Chloe wanted to deliver the news then, believing the symbolism would somehow make her betrayal seem more profound, more justified. The sheer narcissistic audacity of it was breathtaking. "She's going to host an anniversary party," Alina predicted, her voice laced with disgusted certainty. "She'll want an audience. She'll want to paint you as the passionless husband she was forced to escape." And a week later, the embossed invitations arrived. Chloe announced she was throwing us a small anniversary party at our home. "Just close family and a few friends. A celebration of our journey," she'd said, kissing my cheek with lips that had kissed another man just hours before. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. "This is it," I said to Alina on the phone that night. "This is the venue." "Good," she replied, her voice cold and hard as steel. "Let her build her own stage. It will make her fall that much more spectacular." Part 7, A Toast to the Truth. The night of the party was surreal. Our house, the one I had designed and built, was filled with soft music, the scent of catered food, and the low hum of polite conversation. Friends and family, people who had watched Lily grow up, who had celebrated our successes and supported us through our failures, mingled and laughed, completely unaware they were standing on a fault line. Chloe was a vision. She wore a stunning red dress, a bold statement of a woman about to seize her new life. She floated through the room, a gracious hostess, all while exchanging charged, fleeting glances with Ethan, who had come as her colleague. His poor wife, a sweet woman named Sarah, was also there, looking slightly bewildered by the invite. I played my part to perfection. The doting, slightly oblivious husband. I greeted guests, refilled drinks, and smiled until my face ached. Alina was my anchor. She moved through the crowd with quiet dignity, her presence a silent promise that I was not alone. After an hour, Chloe clinked a spoon against her champagne glass, calling for everyone's attention. This was it. The moment she had orchestrated. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice smooth and confident. She placed a hand on my arm, a gesture of faux affection that made my skin crawl. 23 years, it's a long time. And journeys, as we all know, have twists and turns. Sometimes they lead us to unexpected places. She looked at me, her eyes full of a strange mix of pity and triumph. "Mark has been a constant in my life, a solid foundation. But sometimes a foundation can start to feel like a cage. Sometimes you need to break free to truly feel alive." A confused murmur rippled through the room. She was doing it, right here, right now. She took a deep breath, preparing for her grand finale. "What I'm trying to say is that I have been having an affair for the past 8 months with Ethan," I finished for her, my voice calm and clear, cutting through the silence. The room went dead quiet, every eye swiveled from her to me. Chloe's face, which had been glowing with self-righteous purpose, froze in a mask of pure shock. Ethan looked like he was about to be sick. What are you talking about, Mark?" Chloe stammered, her hand dropping from my arm. "I think you know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice devoid of anger, filled only with a profound and weary sadness. I gestured to the large flat-screen TV on the wall, the one we usually used for family movie nights. I pressed a button on a small remote in my hand. The screen flickered to life. The first image was a photo, crisp and high definition, of Chloe and Ethan kissing on that hotel balcony. A collective gasp went through the room. I clicked again, a screenshot of their texts. "He doesn't deserve you." I clicked again. A bank statement showing the $50,000 transfer from our joint account. Sarah, Ethan's wife, let out a small, wounded cry. I let the images hang in the air for a moment before speaking. You wanted to talk about journeys, Chloe. Let's talk about yours. A journey funded by our family's savings, built on a mountain of lies, all while you were planning to detonate not one but two families. I turned to our guests. I apologize for ruining the party, but I felt you all deserved to hear the truth, not the romantic fiction she was about to spin. Chloe was speechless, her face a blotchy canvas of crimson and white. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an ally, a friendly face. She found none. All she saw were the shocked and disgusted expressions of our friends and family. Then, Eleanor stepped forward. She looked not at me, but at her daughter. I am so deeply, profoundly ashamed, Eleanor said, her voice trembling with a quiet, controlled fury. Your father broke my heart with his betrayals, but you, Chloe, you have broken our family's honor. You learned nothing from the pain he caused. You only learned his methods. That was the final blow. The condemnation from her own mother in front of everyone she knew shattered what was left of her composure. With a choked sob, Chloe turned and fled the room. Ethan, after a moment of panic paralysis, scurried out after her, avoiding the burning stare of his wife. The party was over, but for me, something new was just beginning. Part 8, The Sound of Silence. In the aftermath of the party, a profound silence descended upon the house. It was a heavy, weighted silence, filled with the ghosts of 2 decades of shared laughter and conversation. The guests had departed quickly and quietly, offering murmured words of support to me and comforting glances to Eleanor. Sarah, Ethan's wife, had stayed behind for a few minutes, her eyes filled with a sad, dawning understanding. We didn't say much, but we didn't need to. We were two strangers, suddenly members of the same awful club. I gave her my lawyer's card. Chloe didn't come back that night or the next. She sent a single text message a few days later. I've taken a room at a hotel. My lawyer will be in touch. It was cold, impersonal, the kind of message you'd send to a business associate, not the man you'd spent half your life with. The divorce was brutal but swift. My lawyer, armed with the mountain of evidence of her infidelity and financial fraud, left her with very little room to negotiate. She tried to fight for the house, for alimony, for a larger share of our assets, but the evidence was irrefutable. The judge was not sympathetic to a woman who had systematically drained her family's savings to fund her extramarital lifestyle. In the end, I got the house, primary custody of Lily, and a settlement that left me financially secure. Chloe walked away with her personal belongings and a harsh lesson in consequences. Her grand romantic escape had ended in a small, furnished apartment across town. Ethan, I later heard, had been fired after Sarah went to his company's HR department with her own evidence, and they were embroiled in an even messier divorce. The most difficult part was Lily. She was 16, old enough to understand everything. I sat her down the day after the party and told her the truth, gently but without sugarcoating it. I didn't want her to learn the details from anyone else. Her heartbreak was a tangible thing, a second, more painful betrayal for me to witness. She was angry at her mother, confused and hurt. It was Eleanor who helped us navigate that minefield. She became a constant presence in our lives. She'd come over for dinner 3 times a week, helping Lily with her homework and me with the silent, gaping hole in our evenings. She didn't badmouth Chloe, but she didn't make excuses for her either. She just listened. She provided the steady, unconditional love that Lily so desperately needed, and the quiet, stoic companionship that I did. We became a strange, fractured but resilient new family unit, a heartbroken father, a bewildered daughter, and a grandmother who was determined to hold the pieces together. Part 9, Foundations of a New Life. A year passed. The silence in the house gradually changed. It was no longer heavy with loss, it became peaceful. It was the quiet of a Saturday morning with me sipping coffee while reading the paper, Lily sleeping in, and the sun streaming through the windows of a home that was finally, truly mine. My work, which had felt so meaningless in the immediate aftermath, became a source of solace and then joy. I threw myself into the community library project, and it turned out to be the most fulfilling work of my career. At the dedication ceremony, with Lily and Eleanor cheering from the front row, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that was wholly my own. It wasn't something I had sacrificed for someone else, it was something I had built for myself and for my community. I started dating cautiously at first. It was strange, relearning the rhythms of a first conversation, a first kiss. But it was also liberating. I realized that my identity was not solely defined by being Chloe's husband. I was Mark, an architect, a father, a man who had weathered a catastrophic storm and was learning to sail again. There was no single, dramatic resolution, no new woman who swept me off my feet and made everything perfect. Instead, there were a series of small, quiet victories, a genuine laugh shared over dinner, the comfort of a hand in mine during a walk in the park, the slow, steady rebuilding of trust in myself and in the possibility of connection. My relationship with Alina deepened into one of the most profound friendships of my life. We were bound by a shared crisis, but our bond grew into something more. We'd have long talks about history, art, and life. She taught me how to make her famous lasagna. I taught her how to use 3D modeling software to design her dream garden. She was my confidant, my advisor, and in a strange way, my anchor to the best parts of the family I had lost. She showed me that sometimes the most unexpected alliances are the ones that truly save us. After discovering my wife's betrayal, her own mother became my greatest ally, and in doing so, she helped me redesign my entire life. One evening, about 2 years after the party, I was sitting on the back deck with Alina, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. Lily was inside on the phone with a friend, her laughter filtering through the open door. "You know," I said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I used to think a foundation had to be perfect and unbroken to be strong." Alina turned to me, a knowing smile on her face, and now I looked at my house, at the life I had rebuilt from the rubble. Now I know the strongest foundations are the ones that have been broken and then reinforced with something better, something stronger, something true. I was no longer the complacent husband, the oblivious man living in a well-designed lie. I was a man who had faced the ugliest truths about love and betrayal and had come out the other side not bitter, but grateful. Grateful for my daughter, for my work, for a friendship forged in fire, and for the quiet, unshakable strength I had finally found within myself. The blueprint of my life had been torn to shreds, but the new design, the one I was building now, was infinitely better. If this story hit home, like and subscribe for more gripping tales of love and betrayal. The path from heartbreak to healing is a complex one, filled with choices we never thought we'd have to make. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive or seek revenge? What would you have done in my shoes? Your stories and perspectives are what make this community thrive. And be sure to check out the next video popping up now for another twist-filled saga.